it's Stacy. Today we're going to be making a custom matching envelope to go with a distress spray card that I shared last week. We're going to need a We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board, or whatever one you have. There might be some other brands out there. We're using the same stamp set. It's the Close to My Heart Friendship Bouquet. I made some mask out of copy paper. We got some cardstock, a paper trimmer, and here's the We Are Memory Keepers envelope punch board. I'm going to show you that for an A2 size envelope, which is the size of the card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It tells us to cut the paper at 8 1/8 inch by 8 1/8 inch. Now, since my card has some dimension, that was a pretty snug envelope, so I increased the size to 8 1/4 by 8 1/4. And then it tells you on the punch board where to line up your cardstock, and it comes with a scoring tool. So on this envelope it says to do it at 3 3/4. So you can punch the little notch there before you score or after. And I'm going to go with the size it tells me. So now I'm lining that scored line up with the little notch arrow that comes off of the top of the punch board there. And I'm going to show you in the next one. I'll point it out. That little thing there, that you just rotate your cardstock, line it up with those score lines with that little notch there, score, punch and score, and then rotate it. And it is what I was showing is once you get the first one will be at 3 3/4. I'm not sure what the second one is. You just line it up, and then when you rotate it again, if you want to make sure it's correct, it'll line up at that original measurement. And then I was just setting it back in that score area because it didn't score all the way up and into the edge, which I don't think it would matter. I'm going to use my other bone folder here to crease those score lines so that we can stamp on this envelope. Here's a Zig 2-way glue pen. This is a glue pen that becomes repositionable once it dries. While it's wet, it will be permanent. So I'm just adding it to the middle there in the centers so that they'll adhere a little bit. You don't even have to use the glue if you don't want to, because I'm not going to be ink blending. I'm just using it as a mask. So you want to stamp what's going to be in your, what you want up front first. And then I'm going to take that mask, and I shifted that card over, the envelope, to the edge there so that the stamp would fit without overlapping the edges of the stamp positioner. And then I'm just putting it down. There's a waffle flower grip mat in there, which is helping to hold that mask in place. And then I'm putting where I want that next flower. And I planned this all out before I started putting the stamps in there. And I didn't adhere the envelope together for a reason. Because alcohol markers can bleed through cardstock, I didn't want it to bleed through the envelope. So that's why it's not adhered. So I'm just lining up that stamp on top of the mask and then taking that mask away. So I do that at times. I'll stamp out the images, fussy cut them out of copy paper to position, to do a layout and see if I'm going to like it before I actually commit to stamping it out. And then you want to make sure that you clean up that excess ink. I could have pulled the whole thing apart and cleaned it. I don't know why I did it that way. I just didn't want to redo everything. Clean your stamp. I use my hand just to dry it off a bit. And I'm going to go ahead and line up this other mask here. Put it down. And you guys, I think this is like in double speed, so double time. I wanted to slow it down so you could see the process of masking off, because this is essentially a scene, because we are creating depth. And so I just wanted to slow it down so you could see the process. And then I'm using that sunflower, and I'm tilting it on its side instead of having it go straight up and down. You can do it however you want. And when I get it about where I want it, I put that mask down to help line it up, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pull it off. I bring in a post-it note because I didn't want to take the chance of that stem extending beyond the flower that's masked. I don't think it would have. And then I realized, oh, it's still got ink in the area that's pretty close to overlapping. So I'm wiping the ink off. Sorry, I shifted down, didn't realize it was out of frame, but that's what I did. I just wiped that excess ink off and I stamped it down. We're going to put the leaves down, and I didn't make masks for the leaves. I may have, I don't know. I didn't end up using them. There's no reason to. And so I'm just going to stamp the leaves down as well. Make sure you clean your stamp before you reposition it. Otherwise, you'll transfer ink to an area you may not want it. And we'll stamp the next leaf down here. And I just was wiping off the excess ink that I got on my Misty there, because that is an envelope and it does have some dimension to it because it's not glued shut yet. And this is why I didn't glue it shut. I wanted to be able to open the envelope back open so that I didn't take the chance of the Copics bleeding through the cardstock through to the flaps. And then I'm just working with the Copics, the same colors that I used in my card, which are up there on that little acrylic block. And I started with my lightest, and then I'm working to my darkest. And I'm doing the same thing. They're not super realistic. I want them to be cohesive with the card. So I started with my lightest, and then I'm working to my darkest, and I am keeping the highlights on the edges of the petals. And then if they overlap, I will actually take that shadow and butt it up right against the other petal. But other than that, if there's not a whole lot of overlapping of the petals, I'm just taking it and putting it in the center so that it gives it some dimension. And then I'm working to my darkest. And I believe the coloring is at 8 times speed. If you want to see it in slower, if you want to see it closer to real time, just use the settings on your YouTube and you can adjust the speed. It won't be an exact real time, but it will slow it down enough to where you can see a little bit more if you want that. And I'm just going to work those colors from lightest to darkest, and then I'll go back out to my lightest. And I'm sorry guys, I got sick again, like I said in my last video. And man, I don't know, it's like creating this weird brain fog where it makes words hard. I kind of feel like my brain checked out, or my mind checked out. And I can't even think of words. I'm like looking at my husband and he's looking at me and he's like, okay, you're not making any sense. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm not. You love me anyway. It's been a rough year already. I've been off and on sick basically since October. Anyways, so now I'm working out to my lightest again, and I think I had like a Y18 and a Y19. I removed one of those. And then when I put the Y18 in there, I went ahead and carried it out a little bit more to the edges and took away from, I believe that was a Y11, so that it was less highlights on the edges of those petals. And I mean, you can do that. If you find that you have too much of a highlight, just go in and extend those shadows. But if you start with your shadows and you go too heavy on them, it could take over. So just adjust your coloring as you go. And you could do this with colored pencils. You could do this with watercolor. Just make sure you use the right cardstock. I'm just using some Pin and Gear. I think it's 100-pound, but it's not a real heavy cardstock. The GSM is lower on it for this envelope because I didn't want the envelope to be too stout. Using Nina or using Recollections, which I use for my card base, and I actually don't mind the way Copics blend on this Pin and Gear cardstock, so it worked out perfect for me. And then with these centers, I went in with those G's, and they're real bright, and I keep working those shadows and I add it. And I'm using the lines on those centers that for the where I want to put my shadows. So I'm using what the artist put there to determine where I want my shadows. And then I'm going in and dotting with the darkest and with the lightest. And I want some of that green to peek through, but I don't want it to be real dominant. And then I decided I wanted a drop shadow. So I am taking, I believe, a B triple zero and a B quad zero. And so I'm going in, I think this is a triple zero. You guys can probably see it on the big screen. If you're watching on a big screen, and then I'm going out with a lighter shade, the B quad zero, and just kind of blending out that edge a little bit and extending it a little bit just to give it some more interest, to ground the image a bit. And I chose those B's because they were real faint and light. And then I'm taking and I'm punching that rounded corner up on the top on the envelope. And I left enough room to nestle in the address for the recipient. And I used double-sided score tape just because I didn't want to mess with a bunch of liquid glue. And I put those on the very edges of those inner flaps. And then I took glue on the outside edges to adhere it down. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a envelope insert. There's probably an easier way to do this, but this is how I did it. And I don't know why I measured that envelope. It's a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card. So it'd be 5.5 inches wide or a little bit more than that. And I just trimmed it down to fit a little under that. And then I tried to use the paper trimmer to do it freehand and it didn't work. So I went ahead and traced that flap and then cut the lines a little bit inside the line with my paper trimmer. I just positioned it. And then I'm just going to glue the flap there. The part that goes down on the envelope will stay. And then I'm using my scoreboard there to score the flap. And that you would use that double-sided tape or glue to glue it shut before you send it off, of course. And then there it is. There's the matching card, the matching envelope. I'm going to show you that I flip it over with the embellishments facing out so that it'll slide in and out without getting caught up. So if you have any questions, leave them down below. I love hearing from you guys. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Bye guys. See you next time.